One of my favorite things about shonen stories are the villains that feature within them. Some of my favorite villains include Dio Brando from JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, Demon King Piccolo from Dragon Ball, and even Meruem from Hunter x Hunter. A great villain needs to have a perfect combination of power, intellect, as well as a ideology which forms the basis of their motivation in the plot. As a series, Bleach really does stand out with the way that Kubo is able to craft consistently great antagonists. These are not just enemies that need to be overcome because they are very powerful. The key villains within Bleach following the Soul Society arc share in a common goal, which is to disrupt the order of the Soul Society. While their end goals may be totally different, usually the reasoning for them taking action is very similar. Via villains like Aizen, Ginjo, and Yhwach, we begin to appreciate that these villains may have a point in their plan to go against the Soul Society. This is even further expanded upon within the Can't Fear Unworld light novels via the motives of the villain Tokinada Tsunayashiro. In this video, I want to go over the genius of the Bleach villains. I'll be covering everything from Aizen's masterful planning and his deceptions, to Yhwach's desire to rid the world of fear, and how the very first substitute Shinigami, Ginjo Kugo, had decided to rebel against the Soul Society. Be sure to stick around until the very end of this video, as I'll also be diving into other villains like the Grand Fisher, Byakuya, and even Tokinada. Hopefully this video will help you to better understand and appreciate the villains within Bleach. We got really tired of the same old boring anime shirts, so we decided to launch Getsuga.com with the aim of creating designs inspired by our favorite anime and manga. We came up with designs that look cool and represent all of our favorite stories. Check out the latest Instinct collection, which features some amazing designs like this Frosted Heavens design inspired by Toshiro Hitsugaya, or this Instinct design inspired by Hollow Ichigo, and my personal favorite, which is the Heart design, which was inspired by Ulquiorra Shifa. Do not miss out, go to Getsuga.com and wear your favorite stories. So I want to go over the villains in chronological order by talking about the main antagonists of each story arc. During the Substitute Shinigami arc, one of the key villains is the Hollow called the Grand Fisher. He was the most manipulative and crafty Hollow that Ichigo and Rukia had faced off against during that portion of the story. The Grand Fisher uses its law in order to exploit the emotions of people so that it can bait in his victims and trap them. He usually transforms the law into somebody who is dear to his target. The Grand Fisher is a deeply personal villain, especially for Ichigo, as he was the Hollow that was responsible for the murder of his mother. For the first time in this early portion of the story, Ichigo has to confront the trauma of his past. The fact that he was unable to protect his mother from this Hollow, and because Ichigo was baited in by the lore of the Hollow, in some way he feels responsible for the death of his mother. What makes the Grand Fisher effective as an antagonist in this early part of the story is that he represents Ichigo's internal struggles. He is able to transform his lore into Masaki as he forces Ichigo to confront his grief and hesitation head on. The Hollow gives Ichigo an intense psychological attack, exploiting that regret that he feels over his inability to protect his mother. As Rukia had explained, she did not get involved between Ichigo and Grand Fisher's fight, as she remembers Ukitake's words that there are two different kinds of battles: the battle to protect innocent life and the battle to preserve one's honor. Ichigo's battle against the Grand Fisher was for the honor of his mother, which the Hollow was desecrating. While Ichigo did not have a decisive victory against the Hollow during this early portion of the story, it does end up returning as an Arrancar, as it is then defeated by Isshin. I really love the role that the Grand Fisher plays within the story, and if you want to see this animated perfectly, then I highly recommend that you guys check out the Memories in the Rain OVA. It does a fantastic job of adapting the manga content, with the battle between Ichigo and the Grand Fisher being animated really well. The next major antagonistic force within Bleach is Byakuya Kuchiki, who serves as Ichigo's main obstacle to overcome during the Soul Society arc. Kubo does a fantastic job of creating a multi-dimensional villain here, as at first glance he appears to be an untouchable noble who adheres strictly to the law and order of the Soul Society, while also being head of the noble Kuchiki clan and the captain of the 6th Division. Byakuya's cold demeanor and his commitment to Rukia's execution presents him as a powerful, emotionless villain who is not willing to do anything to challenge the execution of his own sister. By the end of the Soul Society arc, we learn that beneath the facade of Byakuya Kuchiki lies an internal conflict, revealing the motive behind his actions. These motives are rooted in two promises that he had made. The first promise was made to his late wife Hisana, whose dying wish to Byakuya was for him to protect her younger sister Rukia. After Rukia was adopted into the Kuchiki clan, Byakuya had made a promise to himself that he was going to uphold the law of the Soul Society and to protect the honor of his clan. This was because Byakuya had done two unconventional acts as the head of the Kuchiki clan. The first was to marry Hisana, who was a commoner from Rukongai, and the second act, which could be deemed as dishonorable to his noble family, was to adopt Rukia into the noble family. Byakuya was then trapped in a rigid sense of duty, as he was forced to choose law and order over his own loved ones. It is this internal conflict which drives his actions during the end of the Substitute Shinigami arc and the entirety of the Soul Society arc. This is why Ichigo's ideology clashes against Byakuya's, as Ichigo finds it difficult to understand how an older brother like Byakuya would sit by and do nothing and allow the death of his sister. It is because of Ichigo's conviction which causes Byakuya to rethink the stance that he had taken on Rukia's execution. In chapter 59, when Renji had visited Rukia while she was imprisoned, Renji had told her that Byakuya was at the captain's headquarters and was most likely lobbying for her sentence to be reduced. He had then stated that Byakuya was her older brother and that there was no way that he was going to stand by and watch her get killed. But Rukia is surprisingly unmoved by Renji's words, as she responds by saying that it's quite the contrary, and that if anything, Byakuya was going to kill her himself. This surprises Renji, and then Rukia makes a rather strange statement that in the 40 years that she has lived with the Kuchikis, Byakuya has not once even looked at her. At the end of the Soul Society arc, Byakuya's character has a transformational change as he arrives just in time to protect Rukia when Gin Ichimaru attempts to kill her. It is here where Byakuya's character transforms from an antagonist, as he decides that his promise that he had made to Hisana is more important than upholding the law of the Soul Society. I have several videos covering Byakuya's character on my channel and the relationship between Byakuya and Rukia, as I feel like Byakuya has some of the best character writing and development within Bleach. So we are going to be talking about a variety of different villains, because next I want to discuss why Grimmjow is such a great antagonist. The 6th ranking Espada demonstrates Kubo's ability to craft villains that have complex motivations, whilst also establishing an unforgettable presence. From his debut appearance within the story, Grimmjow commands our attention with his powerful personality and his cocky demeanor, and this is amplified even further with his unrelenting aggression. Grimmjow is not just a villain for the sake of chaos, as his actions, motives, and his character arc are deeply linked into the themes of Bleach. Unlike the calculated Aizen, Ulquiorra, or even Tozen, Grimmjow is ruled by raw emotion and an insatiable desire to prove his strength. His laid-back but yet savage appearance reflects his panther-like origins as an Yhwach, and the scar that Ichigo leaves on his body, which he refuses to heal, ends up becoming a symbol of his obsession with their rivalry. Learning about Grimmjow's backstory gives us a lot of insight into his worldview. Back when he was an Yhwach, he had devoured countless hollows in order to avoid regressing into a mindless Gillian. He was driven by sheer willpower and a refusal to succumb to failure. He had believed that he was chosen for greatness as he had crowned himself king amongst his peers. However, Grimmjow's superiority complex masks his deeper insecurities. His pursuit for strength and dominance is not just about proving himself, but it's also about avoiding the humiliation of being seen as weak or insignificant by others. Once again, we find that Grimmjow's rivalry with Ichigo is fueled by their clashing ideologies. Grimmjow's destructive quest for validation versus Ichigo's selfless determination to protect his loved ones. For Grimmjow, defeating Ichigo is not just about winning, it is about affirming his belief that he is the strongest, while on the contrary, Ichigo's resilience and his determination forces Grimmjow to confront his own limitations. Grimmjow stands out as an incredible villain because of his great character design, his unpredictable personality, and his aggressive, unrelenting fighting style. We're now moving on to another incredibly well written Espada, and this is Ulquiorra Shifa. Kubo brings a lot of depth and complexity to this character by combining his nihilistic philosophy with the central themes of Bleach. Ulquiorra's detached demeanor and his loyalty to Aizen, which is combined with his questioning of the existence of the heart, makes him one of the most fascinating and memorable antagonists in the series. Ulquiorra truly embodies his aspect of death, which is emptiness. His belief that that which cannot be reflected by the eyes does not exist shapes his entire worldview. This perspective is rooted in his backstory, where he was born into darkness, surrounded by a void which had reinforced his belief in the futility of existence. Ulquiorra's detachment had defined his interactions with others, as he views emotions and bonds as meaningless constructs. These things are alien to his experience of existence. Yet it is this very lack of understanding which draws Ulquiorra to Orihime's unwavering belief in this concept of the heart. It really does create for a fascinating contrast between their ideologies, and in general, Ulquiorra is a loyal servant of Aizen who prefers for more of a methodical and precise approach, as he carries out orders without any hesitation. His cold and composed nature sets him apart from the impulsiveness of other Espada, like Yami or even Grimmjow. As Ulquiorra continues to encounter Ichigo and Orihime, he begins to gradually understand this concept of the heart. He confronts Ichigo's human trait of perseverance, as he sees at first hand Ichigo's determination to continue to fight even though the odds are stacked overwhelmingly against him. His beliefs are also challenged by Orihime, who speaks to him about the heart, a concept which he cannot quantify or even comprehend. Ulquiorra's final moments within the story reveal some incredible character development, as his defeat by Vasto Lord Ichigo strips him of his purpose. But in this moment following Ulquiorra's defeat, it is Orihime's empathy which grants him a fleeting understanding of the heart. As he reaches out to her, the once empty eyes of Ulquiorra begin to fill with meaning as he finally sheds his nihilism. It is a very bittersweet resolution for Ulquiorra's character, as Kubo does an incredible job of conveying to us what it means to be human and the bonds that we share with others via the growth and character development of Ulquiorra. The next villain that I want to talk about is the most iconic antagonist from Bleach, and this is none other than Sosuke Aizen. He perfectly embodies the traits of intellect, ambition, and manipulation in ways that are deeply resonated with the fanbase. Aizen desires to dismantle the Order of the Soul Society, which he views as stagnant and hypocritical, as he desires to become a transcendent being worthy of ruling over reality. Aizen's motives are rooted in his rejection of the Soul King, a powerless linchpin that he deems to be unfit to maintain the order of reality. His contempt for the Soul King drives him to conduct experiments which blurred the boundary between Shinigami and Hollows. His most notable experiment was the holification incident which had taken place during the Turn Back the Pendulum arc, where he had endangered the lives of several captain and lieutenants just to test out his theories. What Aizen had done to the Vizards demonstrates his disregard for the lives of others, as he views people merely as tools in his grand design. His actions are deliberate and far-reaching, from framing Urahara for the crimes that he had committed, to orchestrating a plan which had spanned over 100 years, and to then go as far as to manipulate both of his allies and even his enemies, as we see with the way that he manipulates Momo Hinamori, and how he takes advantage of the Espada who he deems to be expendable, and this is demonstrated with how Baragon and Haribel are treated during the Fate Karakura Town arc. Even his relationship with close individuals like Gin Ichimaru reveal that there is an air of distrust and exploitation, because Aizen was aware of the potential threat that Gin had posed, but he had kept him around for the sake of advancing his schemes. Aizen's downfall was as a result of his own hubris. It was his belief in his own infallibility which had blinded him to all of his limitations and his vulnerabilities, which had culminated in his defeat at the hands of Ichigo, as Urahara had then gotten involved and sealed Aizen within a Kido spell. Aizen was then imprisoned within Muken for a total of 20,000 years, but he returns to the story during the 1000-year Blood War arc to play the role of an anti-hero, as he shares a common goal with the Soul Society in trying to defeat Yhwach, who he refuses to be ruled by. Aizen is one of the most nuanced and layered characters in the series. Recently, I did make a video talking about the motivations of Aizen in great detail, so definitely go and check out that video after this one. Next, we have the antagonist of the Fullbring arc, Ginjo Kugo. He is another memorable villain whose role is deeply linked with themes of betrayal, manipulation, and a desire for vengeance. Ginjo's deeper motivations stem from his distrust with the Soul Society after he discovers that the substitute Shinigami badge that he was given was in fact a surveillance device. The Can't Fear Unworld light novels expand upon this information by revealing the role that Tokinada Tsunayashiro had played in turning Ginjo against the Soul Society. So Tokinada was after the Soul King fragments which had existed within Fullbringers, and for this reason he had transformed Ginjo's substitute Shinigami badge into a surveillance device so he could track down all of the Fullbringers that Ginjo was associated with. Tokinada then proceeded to massacre multiple Fullbringers, stealing their Soul King fragments, as Ginjo in retaliation had murdered multiple Shinigami, as he was led to believe that it was Ukitake who had betrayed him, thus turning Ginjo against the Soul Society. Ginjo had formed the group Execution made up of Fullbringers, and during the Fullbring arc he had taken advantage of Ichigo's desire to regain his powers. He had planted seeds of doubt within Ichigo's mind about his family and his allies, and while he had initially portrayed himself to be a close ally of Ichigo, we learned that this was only possible thanks to Tsukishima's ability Book of the End, which had rewritten Ginjo's memories so that he could play the role of a convincing ally much better. When Ginjo returns to his normal self, he betrays Ichigo without hesitation, stealing his newly acquired powers. What makes Ginjo a fascinating antagonist is that, similar to Aizen and even Yhwach, he has genuine issues with the Soul Society which can be understood. Ginjo felt betrayed by Ukitake, and it isn't until the Can't Fear Unworld light novels where we learn further details about what had happened to Ginjo's friends. At the end of the Fullbring arc, after Ginjo is killed, we do feel sympathy for him, and it's for this reason that Ichigo goes to the Soul Society and asks for Ginjo's body to be buried in the world of the living. This final act of respect highlights Ginjo's tragic role within the plot. He was consumed by vengeance because of bitterness and his feelings of betrayal. This now brings us to the main antagonist of the 1000-year Blood War arc, Yhwach. As the son of the Soul King and the father of all Quincy, Yhwach's character arc is steeped in tragedy as well as conviction. His overall story makes him easily one of the most interesting villains in Bleach, and unlike Aizen, Yhwach did not need to rely upon manipulation or deception. Yhwach instead had executed his goals with unwavering determination. His ultimate goal was to rid reality of the concept of death, and thus end all suffering. He had wanted to do this by combining the human world, the Soul Society, and Hueco Mundo into one realm similar to the primordial world of Bleach. With Yhwach desiring to kill the Soul King and disrupt the cycle of reincarnation, his desire for a new peaceful world threatens the existence of life as we know it. From birth, Yhwach had possessed the ability to heal others by sharing fragments of his soul with them. He had created an unintentional cycle of suffering. Every piece of his soul that he had reclaimed had brought with it the pain, memories, and fears of those that he had touched. This burden shapes his fear of death and fuels his belief that the world's current structure, which is founded on the mutilation of his father, the Soul King, is fundamentally corrupt. This builds upon the motives of characters like Aizen and Ginjo, who also had personal grudges with the Soul Society, and Yhwach, similar to Aizen, wanted to overthrow the Soul King but for different reasons. Yhwach's actions are direct and ruthless, as he wastes no time in declaring war against the Soul Society, as he immediately kills Yamamoto and brutally crushes the defenses of the Gote 13 in the first Quincy invasion. His Shrift ability, the Almighty, embodies his character well, as it symbolizes overwhelming, absolute, and terrifying power. The Almighty doesn't just allow Yhwach to see the future, but it allows him to alter the present via his ability to change future events before they happen. In chapter 684, we had even seen him rewrite his own death. While the Almighty is a great power, it also ends up becoming Yhwach's weakness. His over-reliance on the Almighty had resulted in him being struck by the still silver arrowhead, which the Almighty was blind to see, and it was in that moment when the silver of stillness had mixed with his blood where he was rendered powerless that Ichigo had delivered the final blow. Yhwach's motives and his character is deeply linked with Bleach's themes of life, death, and courage. Via his character, we are made to question whether if a world without fear is all that it's cracked up to be. Aizen's speech on courage at the end poetically conveys the flaws in Yhwach's ideology, and in my opinion, Yhwach is a well-written, nuanced character that is often overlooked by fans, but I'm glad that his role is getting expanded upon within the 1000 Year Blood War arc anime, and we're learning more about his backstory and motivations. Hopefully during Core 4 of the 1000 Year Blood War arc anime, we have even more anime exclusive editions which expand upon the role and character of Yhwach, because easily he is one of the most iconic villains within the series, with his links to Old Man Zangetsu and this feeling like he was always there in the shadows of the series, which literally is true since Yhwach and his army were hiding within the shadows of the Serite. Now we've reached the final villain that I want to talk about in this video, and this is none other than Tokinada Tsunayashiro. Now this character stands out as one of the most evil individuals in the Bleach universe, and he plays the role as the main antagonist within the Bleach Can't Be Your Own World light novels. His actions are not just born from a desire for justice, revenge, or even a misguided sense of idealism. Tokinada is literally evil for the sake of being evil. His core belief is that the world is inherently built upon sin and deceit, and this shapes Tokinada's role as a villain who embodies everything that is wrong with the class system of the Soul Society. Tokinada was born into privilege within the noble Tsunayashiro family, one of the 5 great noble families. Tokinada's descent into darkness had started early on, and it was fueled by forbidden knowledge about the Soul King and the creation of the universe. Unlike other villains in Bleach who had used their power to challenge the system, Tokinada had thrived within it. He had exploited his status as a noble to commit atrocious acts without any consequences. His belief that chaos and evil are the world's natural states had led him to reject morality entirely. He had behaved in a cruel manner just because he could. He is a villain who not only understands the flaws of the Soul Society, but he uses them to justify his actions. Tokinada's ultimate goal is nihilistic, as he wants to expose the truth about the Soul Society's foundations, which is to expose the true nature of the Soul King. Tokinada had created the artificial hybrid being Hikone, and he had wanted Hikone to replace the Soul King. Unlike Aizen or Yhwach, Tokinada has no interest in ruling or reshaping reality. He literally just wants to see the destruction of the world. What makes Tokinada such an interesting villain is that he is very self-aware of his actions. He acknowledges the contradictions in his beliefs. He manipulates others without a second thought, affecting the lives of Tozen, Ginjo, and so many other Shinigami, as it highlights that Tokinada is a living embodiment of everything that is wrong with the Soul Society. His character is a mirror that is held up against the Soul Society, revealing its darkest truths. Now, this was my video covering all of the most iconic villains within Bleach and why the villains in this series are written so incredibly well. If there are other Bleach villains that I haven't spoken about in this video that you want to shed a light to, then let me know by continuing the discussion in the comments. Out of all of the antagonists that I've spoken about in this video, which one is your most favorite? I look forward to reading all of your thoughts, and lastly, thank you for making it to the end of this video, and I cannot wait to see you in my next Bleach Explained video. A massive thank you goes out to all of my amazing Patreon supporters for helping to make this video possible. If you also want to support the channel and see your name in the end of my videos, then check out my Patreon, which has loads of perks like early video access and so much more. Thank you for sticking around till the end of the video, and whatever you contribute will mean a lot to me.